Okay, as requested by popular demand, we're going to do a part 2 of a revised complete tutorial on slider fishing. Are you ready to run and gun? It's time for blast off. Let's go. Hey guys, Todd here with you. Welcome back to Bassin 101 slider fishing tutorial. This is an updated version. There's a few things I've changed since the last video, which was what, maybe 2 years ago. But I've kind of revised everything, made it more simple, more complicated, however you want to call it. I'm going to start off right off the bat with the rod and reel that I use. You know, originally the slider rod was like a 4'9", 4'10", and that's what Charlie Brewer used to use. And you can do that. As a matter of fact, they still sell them. And I thought about getting one just for fun. Maybe even a vintage reel from that era, just for the heck of it. But what I've chosen is a 6.5 foot. This is one that I built. This is an MHX that I built. As you can see, it says slider rod right there. Maybe you can see it, I don't know. But it's a 6.5 foot performance ultralight. Now I've got the Tennessee handle, which I have carved myself to fit exactly the way I want it to fit, with kind of a big handle back here for two-handed casting. It doesn't sit too far back. I do like a short handle, but you've got to be able to balance everything. And if you put too short of a handle, it's going to be a very heavy rod. And this rod weighs less than an ounce. So it's real light. It's got good backbone. It's got a very soft tip. I mean, this sucker right here, you know, if I sit there and shake it, you can see how limber it is, but it's still stout. And especially when you knock the jig off of it. But this is the rod I use. This is a high performance blank. Like I said, the handle doesn't go too far. This is a complete tip to back is about a 10-inch handle. And so I push the reel as far forward as I can because I like to have my finger on the blank. As you can see, I don't use a foregrip, anything. The Tennessee handles make it nice because you can put your finger right on that blank and feel every single thing that's going on, because sometimes they bite this thing and are swimming to you. So you can't always feel, you just have to feel when you're around. It's kind of like David Fritz would be with deep crankbait fishing. I can kind of feel when I'm getting around something just from the water pressure. You do that by using braid to a mono leader. I don't like fluorocarbon. I'm not getting into that. It won't hold a knot. It ain't worth a crap. So I use a 6-pound braid that I can see. This is a gray. This is Daiwa J braid. There's other ones you can use out there just as good, if not better sometimes. But I use the 6-pound Daiwa J braid for now. I might be moving to a different colored type of braid just to make it even easier to see. But I use a pretty decent length leader. I probably use a 15-20 foot leader. And this is green XT Trilene. 6-pound braid, 4-pound leader. You're probably thinking, why so light? Well, one, I want to give that worm all the freedom it can have without using a loop knot. And number two, it gets you further casts. Especially if you're fishing clear water, you can get a much further cast with this lighter rig than you can with straight 6-pound test, or say maybe a 10, like a 10-pound braid to a 4-pound leader. You will sacrifice some casting distance, believe it or not, because you're trying to throw the lightest head you can throw. Now, what I've got on here, this is an 1/8 ounce. This is, I got into some wind one day and a little bit faster fall. So that's what I went to with that. I'll explain that here in a little while. But again, taped on reel. The reel I use, this is a Daiwa Legalis. This is a 6-to-1. And why do I use a 6-to-1? Well, one, I don't crank very fast with a slider. But when I'm done, I want to be able to get that worm in and get another shot out. But not only that, if they're running towards you, which they do a lot of times when they grab that slider, they're running to you, you got to get your line up quick. That's the only reason I do it. You don't have to use a 6-to-1. You could use a 5-to-1, whatever they offer. It's up to you. This is a 2500 size reel, so it's not big, it's not bulky, just an average size. And where my finger sits right there, as you can see, that outfit is perfectly balanced. There's no weight back here, nothing to lighten it up. Everything's straight up. This is the rod and reel that I use for slider fishing. 6.5 foot performance ultralight. With, like I said, it has a fast tip on it. It's got pretty good backbone through here. Now let's go over the heads. First off, this is the box that I use for my sliders. Have you guys ever seen the community post I made? This is my slider box, and you're thinking, why so many colors? I'll explain that here in a little while. Right now, let's do heads. There's two different types of heads for a slider rig that I use. The first type I use is the SPH. Now, when I did the first tutorial, I used the Classic series, and the Classic series is only separated by a 1/4 inch further back hook. I decided to go with the shorter. I felt like the shorter gave me better hookups. You know, I'm always experimenting, and I bend these things like an EWG. I'll show you a picture here what this hook looks like, what I've done to it. The other type head I use is the old Classic slider head. There's two different ways to rig this, but my most favorite rigging, I'll show you here. My most favorite rigging, what I do with my worm. My most favorite rigging is just straight up, just like you would rig a grub. Just a simple straight rigging, just like that. This is open water. You don't want to fish this around cover. I promise you'll be going to get it. And I've also modified this hook too with a slight EWG bend, which I'll show you a picture. And this is strictly for rigging weedless, and I'll show you how that looks too. Got a lot of pictures in this tutorial I did not do in the other one. I've got a little more fancy in my filming. But what I've got in this box, I've got 1/16 all the way through 3/16 in the Classic HPH head. I've got 1/16 and my snipped off 30 in the other one. I do have 30 in the HPH too. A little tube of super glue and 4-pound leader material, and a pair of scissors to cut it with. In other words, this to me is a whole entire system. So in the box, I want everything I can get in there that I need. Other than this, I just need a pair of pliers. But that's how I have this set up, so that whenever I go slider fishing, I just take this box with me, a couple of hand tools I might need. Everything else is already in here. You've got your black colors, you've got your two-tone colors. That's basically what these are, your two-tone colors: chartreuse, blue, pink tail, metal flake colors, and I've also got some natural type colors. And when do I use these things? Okay, that's a good question. Basically, if you're fishing a calm day and you have super clear water, you want natural colors. You know, you want your creamy reds, green pumpkins, salt and pepper. Although this is more of a sand color because these have gotten old. They've gotten kind of a sand look to them. I like that over salt and pepper. I've only got a couple of packs of those, so I'm kind of hanging on to those pretty good. You know, your smoked pink tail, believe it or not, that's a great clear water color. So was it Natural Pro Blue? You know, the green shrimp, green pumpkin. You know, those are all good natural type colors. You just kind of play around. The lake I've been fishing here lately, for some reason, that Natural Pro Blue has been a good worm. I don't know why, but that's just something they've been hitting here lately. And I've even done pretty good with the smoked pink. Now, if you've got a kind of a cloudier day, but you've got you still have clear water, but you got more of a cloudy day, that's when some of your metal flakes might come into play, like the bluegill, the bluegill type color, which is basically just smoked metal flake. Here's a color that's discontinued, but this is really good too, cotton candy. And yes, I boil all these, so mine are like super soft. and also straightens them out. But you know, your blues, blue metal flake, your red metal flake, electric blues. This is Irish whiskey, which to me is more kind of just like a root beer green pepper. Those are good on cloudy days. But also on bright days when you have windy conditions, the metal flake comes into play too, because now it's got something to reflect more light. They can see it a lot easier. That's what you're trying to do with a slider worm. You want them to see it, but you don't want them to see it where it spooks them if it runs across them. So that's the main thing. And of course, traditional colors. To me, one of my favorite all-time worm colors is the electric blue. Just a purple grape with a blue flake. That's one of my all-time favorite color worms. So I have that too, and I've actually caught quite a few of them off of that. But that's your color selection. You know, stay natural if you've got a calm, clear water day. If it gets a little cloudy, try some metal flake. If it gets windy, definitely metal flake. If you've got stained water, I'll tend to use more of the purple pinks, the black chartreuse, black and blue tails. You can fish this if you have like a foot to foot and a half visibility, which to me, what I'm used to, that's pretty stained. I would stick with the black colors. But I have caught fish in that color water. But they're around cover, so you have to throw this in cover. And as long as you got that, as long as you got a good drag system and a good flexible rod, you can actually lead that, when that bass hits, you can lead him out of that brush pile and then pop him. I've actually done it. I showed to a buddy of mine one time. I was in the boat with him. He's just kind of like, I ain't never seen something like that before. I was like, you can do it. It actually came out of Charlie's book. But you can do it. So this is my setup here. I know everything looks complicated, but here's how I look at it, guys. This is a complete system. When I finesse fish, this is what I use. I don't use anything else. I played with grubs, I've played with tubes, I've played with all kinds of stuff to finesse fish. Nothing can top this, to me. This is my crutch. So that's why I have a lot of different colors in here, because to me this is a system. You can, like with this creamy red, you can do earthworm with that. You know, a very natural earthworm kind of color. Here's your shads, your shad type colors. It does everything. And then if you want your just old school power type fishing type colors, you know, you got your blues and reds and greens and stuff like that. Purple pink tail or purple fire tail. But that's the reason I keep a bunch of these in here. It's just because this is all I do for finesse fishing. I do have my favorite colors in here, yes, and I do throw them, absolutely. But that's what I've got going on there. And like I said, it's, you know, I boil them so they're super soft. This is the creamy green shrimp. This is a great clear water color, and this thing almost glows in the water. It's really, really cool, and it's not a very bold type of color. But getting back to the rod real quick, again, you want a rod that has tip. You don't want like a medium action. You don't want that in a slider rod. Medium light, you better check the rod tip, because you can have the backbone, but you've got to have that tip. And I ain't talking about just a little tip on the end. I'm talking at least a third of that blank is going to have to be tip. So medium light to a light is best. Like I said, just test the rod. If you go to a store and to look at one, test the rod. Okay, test it to make sure it's got that tip. You know, touch it on the ceiling if you got a tackle store, on the floor. Do the line trick I told you. Put a snap on the end of it, hook it to the end of the rod, and just kind of pull on it. See how it loads up. That's the best way to do it. When I bought this rod blank, I was kind of hoping it would be stiff enough. I wasn't quite sure, and even when I built it, I was kind of debating. But you've seen on a couple of episodes of me slider fishing, this thing loads up beautifully all the way through to the handle, with plenty of backbone to really get that hook set. And I can actually come back and set this like a worm and not worry about breaking my line because of the way this rod loads up. Normally you kind of sweep into a hook set. You don't want to jerk it. You want to sweep it, which I still do. I still use a slower hook set on this than I use on other worm rigs, but I'm still hooking it pretty good. And I mentioned the slack line hook set on the last video I did, which is once you get that thing set and you're fighting that fish to drop that rod tip just an inch or two and all of a sudden snap that slack out of the line, you'll bury that hook deeper. You've seen me do that on this channel too, on catching fish, or see me snap it. I haven't lost a fish doing it. And you won't break your line because the rod will load if you have the proper rod. That's the most important thing. You have to do the right rod. There's no other question about it. Now, as far as rigging these things, so here's the SPH. Again, like I said the last time, you want the paddle tail flat to go with the hook. You don't want flat going, you don't want the flat this way with the hook and to go up and down like this. That's not the action you're wanting. You want this turned sideways so you can see the paddle tail and the hook is going the same direction. That's very important, because if you rig it flat, it's not going to track straight. I mean, in other words, it's not going to have that same dead action, if that's how you call it. Now, if I'm fishing open water, I'll do it just like that right there. But if I get into cover, I'll just barely skin hook it and still keep that worm straight. That's the reason I put that EWG bend in these hooks, and I'll make sure that they're super razor sharp. But that's how I do the SPH head. Now, I showed you how to do this head, but there's also another trick where you take, well, let me just do one real quick, because this falls so much differently. Let me get my smart man specs on here. Let me let's get this off real quick. That was easy enough. Kids, don't try that at home. You'll break your teeth. And again, the paddle tail's going the same way. I come about a 1/4 inch back. That's the very first segment of the head. And I'm going to go straight through just like that. I'm going to take that loop and catch it on the barb. Bring it straight through the worm just like this. Looks like a sewing needle. Okay, so you see that? That's how that's done right there. I'm just going to tie a simple clinch knot. I'm not going to get too fancy with knots. Palomar is what I would definitely tie on this, but just for demonstrations, I'm just going to do a clinch knot so you can see what I'm doing here. By golly, got it tied that time. All right. I'm going to slide this down. Let it rest on the head. And I'm going to push the head over the line tie. You see that right there? It's right over the jig head eye. Now, again, this is two different ways you can rig this. If you're fishing open water, you can rig it with the hook exposed, or because I put that EWG in there, I can also skin hook it. Just like that, fish that dude in cover. One problem. Because you have this thing going against the head and you're kind of pulling against it, kind of a downhill deal, this is not the best way to fish cover, because you will get that head hung fishing it like that. But this gives it just a completely different glide. You know, when you first hit that thing in the water and it hits the water like that, it has a different glide in the water. And as you're reeling it to you, it will actually pendulum just a little bit. If you keep it slow, it'll pendulum just like that in the water. Of course, not that drastic. But that's the other way to rig it up. So two ways on this one. One way on this one, but you can do it exposed or pinned. So that way you can fish and cover. This is what I fish and cover. Now, why the different size heads? Okay, good question. When it comes to this head, like I just showed you, the advantage to having the lighter heads, which I use a 32nd and I use a 16th. The 32nd, I just trim it down, and then you have the 16th. Because that's open water. Okay, that's what I throw in open water. If I'm throwing these type heads and I'm not getting any hits, then I will throw the other head. Okay. Now, since this is my main head, like I said, I have 32nd, 16th, 8th, and 3/16. Why the heavier heads? Well, one, I want a lighter head because I want the most natural action I can get. You don't want this thing falling down the water like a chunk of lead. Okay. However, when the wind picks up, or something just doesn't feel right, then I'll go to the heavier heads. The last video that I tried to shoot, and unfortunately my GoPro lost half of the film footage. The beauty of filming, so that video won't come out. But I was throwing the 16th. I was fishing bluffs, steep sides of points, and I was throwing this thing out there. I went through one complete bluff, maybe 100 yards, never got a fish. I said, well, something's not right here. So I got to the end of the bluff, and I said, you know what? I wonder if it's the fall rate. Maybe it's falling too slow because the wind was picking up a little bit. I said, maybe it's falling too slow. So I went to the 1/8 ounce. First cast, before it even hit the bottom, a fish picked it up. Like, oh, the fall rate was too slow for the 16th. Yeah, that's some stuff that you got to think of. And as I went along towards the very end of that bluff, as it hit bottom in about 5 feet, I was dragging it off where it came off the shelf, and I was just barely moving it. But because I was able to swing a little bit deeper, a little faster as I was slow cranking it, I picked up another one. So sometimes the heavier weights will play out, but majority of the time it's the lighter weights that do better for me. Now, as far as how do you work these things, well, let's take this off again. I gotta retie that later anyway. You know, if you watch Charlie's video or you read his book, there's a few different methods that you can use. I use just a handful of them. I don't use very much. I've noticed here at the reservoir I've been fishing with clear water, I point my rod tip directly at the bait and slow crank it. That's all I've been doing. And with your pointing right at the bait, you're getting direct line contact with no rod at all. And you can feel every single thing that worm is doing. As soon as he hits it, you can just swing right back and pop him. Another one is what he calls polishing the rocks. And that's just your standard technique that we've used for worms, or with worms for years, is once it hits bottom, you just take the rod tip and just drag it across the bottom and stop. Drag it across the bottom and stop. And that's another good technique I've caught a lot of bass off of in a slider rig. And the last technique that I use, well, not really the last, but one of the other techniques I use is the lift and let it fall. I don't use this quite often unless that's the action they want, but I'll be honest with you, this is the least productive method I've used so far. Okay, but you can do it if you like throwing a worm like that. Okay, just remember, this is not like any other worm you've ever thrown. This is a complete different system. The last one is really good for this type head I showed you, and you can rig it that way or you can rig it straight. Is basically just what I call the swing. If you have say bridge pilings, or you have deep cover and you're making short kind of pitch casts, say 40-50 feet, and as soon as it hits the water, you engage the reel and just set your rod tip down and just let the lure start to swing, then lift your rod tip to you to take the bow out of the line and let it swing. Just kind of reel up and keep up with it until you figure out what depth they're hitting at. This is good with, probably 16th is the lightest I'd go with. 1/8 ounce is probably going to be a better deal because you are fishing a little bit deeper water, and especially if you know that the bass are deep. All right, now that I've got some line here, let me see if I can show you how much tip is in that. You see that? That's a fast action ultralight. This is the kind of tip I'm talking about. This is what you want, a very little effort to get that thing to bend. This, like I said, 6.5 foot, and I only have 6.5 foot for better control of the fight, and also so I can get that long cast. A 32nd ounce weight with that slider head, you can get a pretty decent cast. But mostly, if I'm going for distance, I'll use that 16th ounce. I'll use that dude right there, that 16th ounce head, or this one here, the 16th ounce head. Just depends on the kind of rate that I want to fall. I will admit, this style head, the SPH, is my main head. I use this 95% of the time. I only go to this one if I can't get them to hit the SPH. I'll go to this head, rigged this way, or traditionally, just like a grub on the back like I showed you earlier, and it gives it a completely different type of action. It's a different shaped head, gives us a little bit different action. Rigged this way, it gives you a definitely different action. Okay. The other one kind of has a, as it falls, it kind of does this, where that one kind of goes like, kind of does more of an S figure, but thank goodness it doesn't twist your line. It stays pretty much straight. That's all I can think of, guys, to keep it simple, to keep it extravagant like I've done here, but keep my heads just two different kind of heads. I keep them simple. I've modified the hook, the bend of the hooks. I've got 16 colors in this box. Like I said, you guys are probably looking at that and thinking, man, that's just too confusing. But for me, I'm okay with this. Because just like I said, this is my finesse setup. When nothing else works in power fishing, then I go to this. I don't go to anything else. I don't do tubes, grubs, any of that kind of stuff. If you guys do that though, stick with it. I'm just saying, for me, hands down, that's how I catch my fish if they're not wanting to hit anything else. But that's all I've got, guys. That's all I can think of right now. I don't think there's anything else I've missed. Let me think. Nope, I don't think there's anything I missed. But at least this time I've got some pictures that will help you out, show you the different riggings I have, and it'll definitely will help you in your deal, because I've gotten so many emails, so many text messages of you guys saying, well, are you ever going to do another slider video? This, that, and the other. And I think what it was is I've had a couple of videos come out where I slider fished, and it's brought it all back because I've been wanting to do some on the water stuff, and I plan on doing some more on the water stuff with slider worms all year long, because it's a 4-season bait. Even in the dead of winter, I'll use a slider worm. Actually, in the dead of winter, that's about all I use is a slider worm. So, again, that's my finesse system. It's a complete system from top to bottom. Oh, top. You can throw this on top. If you go to the 32nd head or even a 16th ounce head, this is where the 6-to-1 reel comes in handy. How many times have you fished a slider or just a worm in general? As you reeled it back to the boat, you see a fish chasing it, then turn off. I've done that so many times, especially in the river, fishing with a slider. And you'd be surprised how many times I've had to go to, as soon as it hits the water, lift that rod tip and start that worm burning back. I mean, burning it back just under the surface, creating a wake with the head. Oh, man, I'm going to tell you what, I've caught some good smallmouth doing that. I've caught a few largemouth doing that too. So yeah, definitely a top water type deal. So, well, I wouldn't call it top water, but it's kind of like you're waking a spinnerbait, you're waking a slider. That's also a really good way of doing it too. That's all I can think of, guys. If I think of anything else, I'll do another video on it, but that's pretty much just the most simplest way of doing something in a complete system with just a couple of shaped heads, a few weight choices, colors of worms. You don't have to do this many colors of worms like I do, but I've caught fish on every single color that's in here. So why not carry it? Doesn't mean I'm going to use them all the time. No, because a lot of these are discontinued. But I've still got several packs still left of them, so I'm going to use them. But again, I hope this helps you. And like I've always said to you guys, remember, new techniques are trendy, but bass never change, and this is not a trendy system. This is a bona fide, sure enough fish catching system. May the Father bless you, keep in Yeshua's name, and as always, fish on.